Begin. Thanks for joining us. I know this is not the typical time we do these sort of things, but this was a really important topic, and we have some pretty awesome folks with us to share that topic. Hi, I am Scott Quimby from CSI. I think everybody on the call knows me. Welcome. We have Lisa here. We have Rob Lamb and Greg Skasny from Blue Shift Cybersecurity. Um, it's very, very rare that we have any vendors talk on any of our things. We are very, very selective in that fact, and there's a reason for that. We don't like to do marketing uh, stuff in terms of just marketing for the sake of marketing. We do things based on technical need, technical awareness, and when we bring someone in, it's because we really believe in what they bring to the table, and that's the case today um, with what we're going to talk about. Basically, if many of you I look on the list, you've been around for nearly as long as me. And you've been through it. We started out with antivirus, then we got web filtering, then we had the antivirus wasn't good enough, and we had to get figure out how to do patching, and we had we've gone through this progression, and those that would do us harm, our districts harm, our staff and students harm, they're getting more and more sophisticated. As we up our game, they up their game. And looking at the list of who's on today, um, I'm not gonna belabor some of this basic stuff, but antivirus, I have a lock, I have a door, hopefully it's going to do good. Filtering, I can see who's out there, I can try to block it. What we're into now is this concept of EDR, MDR, XDR, and quite frankly, and I've said this before, a lot of people use these terms as marketing terms, right? As the next generation. Some people call it antivirus 2.0, but it's really more than that. It's not just looking for a very bad thing .exe, but starting to look for behaviors, starting to look for fileless attacks, things that the basic antivirus like Windows Defender or Trend or Sophos or Bitdefender, the basic stuff just doesn't do. Then we start trying to manage this and start talking amongst ourselves to share information, um, and that's good, and that's the next level. My analogy is, we have cameras, motion detectors. They can get examined. We get a better picture of what's going on. We call the police. Hopefully, they do something. It's still reactive though, and we're still waiting, kind of in the wings with the machine guns. The next level is really what we're going to talk about today. Is you know maintaining stuff in school districts is like herding cats, right? You guys know that. The concept of all antivirus, the concept of all EDR, the concept of everything's patched, OS, and it's really, really hard. The concept of keeping everything up to date is really, really hard. And how do you know what you don't know? And all of you guys on the call, you already have too much work. You have limited staffing. You have too much work. You have a limited budget, and you can only do what you can do. I was watching as part of my CISSP continuing education the other day. I was watching, and someone from Estonia, and he's on the front line of cyber defense, and he showed in like 10 minutes an example of how someone could come in to a limited user like your one of your students, and in 10 minutes be local admin and basically take over your world. And how do you know that they're out there? How do you know they're phoning home? How do you know? This is how you know. We've looked at a lot of things, and there are a lot of good products, but these folks at Blue Shift Cybersecurity with their SOC and their protection uh, um, um, system basically provides a tremendous amount of oversight in ways that we as CSI can't do, BOCES Rick can't do. Um, no one's going to have the staffing to do this and to try to bring up a, a, a sock or whatever. It's $1 million+ just to turn one on. It's just not real. So the question is, how do we get these services that we need as the landscape is changing? How do we get them into where they can fit, overlay whatever you're doing, which you quite frankly still need to do with your endpoints and all that other stuff. But how do we get that in a way that can manage without overwhelming the you know what you guys already have to do? The other thing that's going on, and I can't really stress this enough, is that the what is going on is changing. When we all went into this with ransomware, the object was ransomware, right? I'm going to come in, I'm going to put this stuff on, I'm going to encrypt it, I'm going to hold you hostage, whatever. Now, because your defenses are getting so good on the endpoints, the object is take your data, right? And then ransomware is often the lovely parting gift, right? After I picked you dry, the average dwell time I was reading the other day from Huntress, our friends at Huntress, and they were like, it's 277 days that the attackers are hanging out. You know, they're going to take your data, and we even know it. We've had a couple cases recently um, where we've had some incursions, and and one of them we're pretty confident as to how long they were in. The other one, I don't know. I just truly don't know. Whereas what we're going to see in a second is these folks would know, and they would know really quick. Um, and we can personally testify to that because we have witnessed that. Um, and the other thing, this concept of living off the land, as our tools have gotten better on the endpoints, the attackers and the recent attacks we've seen that they lived off the land, and that's basically using the tools that are built in to keep under the radar to try to do their work. But what we need to do to see that is we need to see the noise that they create. We need to up the noise so that we can catch them in the act as quickly as possible. The other new frontier, which is coming to your world, whether you realize it or not, is Office 365 and Google Apps, whichever side you are. And I realize most of you are Google Apps, but I know there's at least two Office 365 districts on the call. Is getting into that. We just saw Microsoft hacked, Microsoft executives hacked again. All right, we just saw HPE executives hacked again, all through Office 365. So being able to deal with visibility into those streams to look for malicious actors is another thing that's coming on the horizon. And I can tell you, because I've been searching really, really hard in that, the fact that you're a school district and you have thousands of Google Apps licenses or thousands of Office 365 licenses, the prices to even get into that field for most of the vendors providing services, and a lot of services, quite frankly, aren't that good at this point, is astronomical. So these folks also start to play in that and pulling that data in. Um, and again, I've written the other day. I wrote about this with my lock the keys before you go on vacation tidbit. Um, it's really, really important that we see this as quickly as possible. Um, and if you can't have 100% coverage because you can't afford the fancy EDR tools, or you have gaps because uh, endpoint detection went offline or was uninstalled trying to fix some software, you still need something to play center field, and this is that something we believe. Um, and the other thing, Huntress had a statistic where they said if you're a SOC and you haven't seen 50,000 of something, you probably aren't that good. These guys are that good, right? In terms of they've been around the block in terms of knowing what threats look like. Um, and if you look, I read just before this call, I read that LG smart TVs have a major vulnerability in them. Um, and we've seen you see these reports in the news about well, it's not K-12, but water plant attacks and all these things in the cyber warfare. They're living in IoT devices. They're living in DRAX. They're living in these things you have on your network. You don't you don't even know what they are. They're hiding in smart TVs, and then they're coming out and they're launching their attack. How do you see that? That's an agentless thing. I could never put an agent in a smart TV. I could never put an agent on a vape detector. How do you see that? You look for the noise. You look for that cross traffic. Um, and traditional tools that we have, as good as they might be, don't just don't do that. But that's where they go because we're better at the endpoint. So hey, I'll go hang out in the direct card you forgot to patch. I'll go hang out in the IoT device. I'll hang out in the, the smart TV or the Android uh, tablet device that's in most classrooms. Um, the other thing I like about uh, these folks is they basically are just playing center field and picking through all the IP traffic, everybody who's banging on your door and picking out who are the malicious actors, and that they can essentially intervene and shun that traffic, mitigate that traffic inside or outside. Um, and it's from our standpoint, it's really low noise. We're not spending a lot of time managing this. Quite frankly, just the opposite. It's very little time managing this. They're really quiet. If they tell you something, it's something that you want to know. Um, this is another example. It's a local example. We did a pilot, and Blue Shift was in place, but it was in the middle of being configured, and we didn't have as many agents as we'd like, and we didn't have anything. And one guy's day, they basically reach out and go, "We're watching this site's data leaving," right? It's we're watching it go out, and they're telling us what type of data it is. And when you picked it apart, and this is all like near immediate, right? It's just like, hey, this stream is going on, and we're watching just what I said. The data's leaving before the lovely parting gift. And so they're like, it's coming from this place. This is the type of data we're seeing, which allowed us to immediately both identify, what needed to have the plug pulled, but also, was it, uh, you know, data that was personally identifiable information, reportable, whatever, and immediately take it out. There's no way we would have known that without these folks sitting playing center field like that. Machine without an agent, machine wasn't patched right, all the things that happen. We've all been guilty. I'm going to get to it tomorrow, and then the crisis comes up and we forget, and here it is. Just the data's leaving. They got in however they got in. The data's leaving. It got shut down. Bam, 1 2 3, and they were gone. And the good news was, what they were what they had touched wasn't personally identifiable or anything. It was just mostly noise. They hadn't gotten far enough in what they did. Now, we all know my partner, Bob, and Bob can be an ordinary guy. He wants what he wants, and um, he's very unimpressed by most things for the 44 years we've been doing this together. And I asked Bob, since he couldn't be here, I asked him to write his summary of what he thought of Blue Shift Cyber XDR solution. And this is Bob's solution. And the Blue Shift people haven't seen this before because it wasn't there when we showed before. But I thought this was very telling and a very great summary. It can gather a more holistic 360-degree picture of the network than just endpoints can see. It can pull traffic from devices that don't have agents, can't have agents. You forgot to put agents on. It can do IoT devices. You can get sensors to grab key locations, north, south, east, west data. You can combine that with the syslog data and all those telemetry feeds I had on those other slides to get a robust picture of what's going on. And then you got these folks sitting out in their SOC with their tools sifting through all these telemetry streams to see, is this a thing? And then being able to promptly, and I do mean promptly, report back and uh, give us the information we need to kill the intruder. And you just can't do it with agents alone, though agents are an important part of the telemetry stream. And then Bob again references the traffic blocking that the SOC can do on the fly. So, Bob doesn't say things like that, quite frankly, about very much. And he said that about that. So I'm going to summarize here, and then I'm going to hand it off to my friends at Blue Shift, and they're going to show you a bit about what's behind the curtain. We've been probably doing this now about almost 2 years. I think we've been in one way or another working with them. I think it's about 2 years now. So we have some history, and like I said, we have some war stories. So um, low noise, high visibility, world class SOC builds on what you have, and when you start talking about all that other stuff that you're going to have to buy um, in this cloud world and all this other stuff, I think they're as affordable as you're going to get in this marketplace. So we're going to turn it over to Greg here, and Greg's been at this a while too. Not as much as me, but he's been heads down on the security side of the house, probably far longer than me. And I've seen him talk before. He's got some pretty cool things to show us. So I think I made you a co-host. So I think you should be
I
able
think you
to.
have to enable me to share my screen because it says host disabled
Oh, really?
participant
Okay.
screen sharing. So
All
let you
right.
go ahead and
Well,
share my
let's
screen.
find you. Um,
I did change my name.
yeah, we did change your name. We had a make host. Yeah. All right. So
And
yeah.
there
Okay.
we go. I resumed that. So let
Uh,
me
all right.
share
So take it
share
away.
my share my screen. So all right. Hopefully people can see this. And um, Scott, thank you for all the nice things you said. That was really some of the things I wasn't expecting. Um, and a little bit nice thing about the people who are listening today. I'm not a sales guy, so we have one of our marketing people here. That I'm not that guy. My role. I am a co-founder at Blue Shift. I'm the CTO. I helped develop this platform several years ago. It was part of a it was initially part of a project I did for a customer. I can't say who, but um, we were able to utilize that platform and put it in other customers. I spent most of my time prior to being involved with Blue Shift in a company called Cygent, which does very low level data security around hard drives, which is unique. But I spent most of my time before that doing offensive security. So I was a red teamer. I did adversary simulation. I did penetration testing, risk management framework stuff. I taught that both offensive and so red teaming offensive and blue team strategies at NASA. I still teach there once in a while, mostly for what's called ICS and OT, so industrial control systems and operational technology, which I have a background in. And I spend a lot of time breaking into systems like that, along with financial systems and municipalities, school systems, lawyers' offices, you name it. And out of that frustration is what this platform was born. People tend to think and talk about their defensive strategies. I'm going to tell you about what we do um, in terms of, like my IT teams can take care of that. And when we would come in and show them how poor their visibility was and do absolutely atrocious things to their network, I could show them that again, your IT teams aren't prepared to do this, and you shouldn't expect that. You need to think a little bit differently about your cyber defenses. I teach for the IRS. I also teach for law enforcement here in Florida, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, other cool places like that. So I like to talk. I'm extremely technical. So if you ask questions, you have questions, let me know. I'm happy to you know jump in and explain questions or answer questions. But I was one of those few technical people that was born with the gift of gab, and I like to talk and I enjoy what I do a lot. So I may talk fast and I apologize, but one of the things I don't have, and my lawyers make me do this, is I don't have any artistic capability. So I stole every single picture out of this that you see in anything in this presentation. So um, the one thing I talk to people about our platform, and it's really just a different methodology, a different way of thinking about how to defend the right way to utilize technology and people to defend your organization. And when you go to talk to people, you ask a bank president or you ask a board member, what do you want from a defensive cyber capability? And the first thing they will say is keep them out. Don't let the adversaries, that's what I call them, I don't call them hackers or they're just adversaries, but it's an adversary. Don't let the adversary into my network. Don't let them into my systems. And I say, well, that's impossible. It's just you are playing a very much losing game, putting yourself what I call the wrong end of the equation. The reason for this, and I'm sure if there's people on this call who are technical, you'll understand this, is that if you're going to place your company or your organization's livelihood, existence on the ability to prevent a cyber attack, it means that you have to be perfect. You must be perfect 100% of the time. You must know all the attack vectors. You must know all your vulnerabilities. You must know your complete attack surface. You must know that your users will 100% of the time never make a mistake. And then you can prevent. That's not possible. We all know that, right? We all know that's not the reason companies like AT&T and Chase and Verizon get breached, and you hear about that in the news just here recently. What I tell them they have the ability to detect and respond. Now, I'm not saying that people should get rid of their EDRs or their firewalls or their preventative technologies. You should make yourself a hard target, right? You should make the adversaries work for what they want, which is your data, your customers, your infrastructure, those sorts of things that they're trying to get after. You make them work for that. But if you do not have the ability to quickly detect and to respond to anomalies in your environment, you're going to have a bad day eventually. It's going to be that day that comes where if you're an IT department or you're in the security department and you don't have this capability, you're going to get what's called an RGE. This is not my nomenclature. I stole this from somebody, but it's called a resume generating event, right? You're going to have a breach and someone's going to be looking for a new job. We don't want that. And so what we do is we bring that both the technology, so the platform, and the expertise to enable companies to have a detection and response capability and do it for an affordable price. We try to make it as affordable as possible. And I'll talk about how we do that real quick. So this is kind of just an overview of how we do what we do, right? So it's pretty simple. You can't defend what you can't see. So defensive cyber means that you really need to be able to pull information from many, many disparate systems from as many places in the organization as possible, get them into a platform where you can normalize that data, that you can write algorithms and run even some AI across that data, and come up with events that your SOC can then investigate to see if those are actually true malicious events, right? So that's what we do. And we have this I made this slide, but and I split this off kind of half and half of what we give as the platform, which is not special. So I'm not going to say our platform isn't special, but doing the stuff on this left side is anybody can do. If you have some spare time, you have enough technical expertise, you can do this yourself. Stuff on the right side is the stuff that's a little more difficult. It's what our value add is. It's the things that are proprietary to us and the things that we bring to the table. So the back end of what we have is a SIM, and I use that term SIM in the nomenclature. Everybody knows what a SIM is, right? They know it's a place to store logs. Our back end of our SIM is an open search cluster, right? And each one of our customers has this open search cluster. It's just a way to be able to store massive amounts of data, textual data, back end, all that's JSON, to get information into a system that we can then run massive queries on and AI and anomaly detection, all those sorts of things. So that's kind of the centralized things that we do is we have this open search backend that sits at every customer that allows us to store this massive amounts of data. Now we got to figure out what data to get in there. So we utilize agents. Our agents are Wazoo agents. If you haven't heard of Wazoo, I don't hide the fact there's other companies out there that are competitors of ours who use the same agent. Sorry, they do, but and they kind of obfuscate that fact. I'm not about the obfuscation. The agents, there's only so much information you can get off an endpoint, right? Your technology limited to what you're going to get off there. You're going to get log data, configuration data, software installation data, vulnerabilities, those sorts of things. There's no reason to design your own agent to do that. The agent's open source. I can look at the source code. I know exactly what it does. I'm not worried about someone sneaking in a supply chain attack against there. It's been vetted. We can vet it ourselves, and it's free, quote unquote free, right? So we can pass that savings on to our customers. Now we augment that with several things. So on Windows systems, we run a Sysmon instance, and in Linux and some Mac systems, we'll do some OS query stuff. And there's still other things that we actually augment the agent data with to get us the amount of telemetry we want to get from the system. And we augment the back end too. But that gives us that kind of data we need from endpoints, right? So we can monitor logs, we can monitor security configurations and all that kind of stuff. And then we need to start getting data from other sources, right? So like Scott had talked about, we get data from your cloud system. So we integrate with Amazon AWS, the Google, both Google Cloud Platform and G Suite, Azure, Office 365, Oracle Cloud, and we pull the information from those things into the system as well. Now that gives us a little bit of advantage. So let's take Office 365. Now I'm not Office 365 shop. He talked about most of you being G Suite shops. That's what we are. We use G Suite. But for like Office 365, there's a limit on some of the standard packages of how long you can go back and query data. I think it's like 7 days. We query that data as it comes in. It's streamed to us. And so we keep that data for a much longer period of time. Helped us with our correlations. So we can start looking at things that we see on endpoints, correlate that stuff to what we see in the cloud. We can start putting a picture together when an anomaly happens of how we're going to investigate that. There's some other integrations I'll talk about we do as well. The last thing we'll do is we have an MNDR capability, and this is the thing that Scott talked about as well: managed network detection and response. I'm a network geek. I love my packets. I love Wireshark. I want to see low-level network data wherever possible. Every place you have a firewall, any east-west between LAN segments and DMZs or server nets or things like that, we want to watch that traffic as it goes through. And people are like, why? Why do you want to do that? Well, realize, and I can tell you this from being an ex-red teamer, anything you run in software, our agents included, and any EDR that you name, throw an EDR up there, can be bypassed. And some of these can be bypassed pretty simply. It doesn't take much once you get access to the system. And Scott talked about getting to be a local admin, like getting a normal user, then privilege escalating to a local admin. That will give me 90% of the time the things I need to bypass most EDRs, most antiviruses, and those sorts of things. And so we need a non-bypassable detection mechanism. And looking at network data does that. Realize your adversaries, 90+% of the data breaches done is by an external adversary. Even insider threats are done. They still use the network. All of them use the network. They have to use the network for reconnaissance, for that initial compromise, for command and control, for exfiltration, all the things that is part of that go into the data breach. They have to use the network for. And they can't stop us from looking at network data, right? I can put this device in line, I can put it on a spanner or a tap, and those ports that I'm actually sniffing and those networks I'm sniffing, the device doesn't even have an IP address on those networks, doesn't have to. So they can't stop us from doing that. They have to use the network. So that's an important distinction, that it's one of those always on non-bypassable detections. The second thing that's important is it allows us to see all the things. And that's something that Scott mentioned that I was trying to let him talk, and I have a horrible habit of wanting to interrupt people. And I didn't. I kept my mute on. But what he said about, even smart TVs or any kind of IoT or ICS devices that are out there is 100% certain. It happens. It happens all the time. But having a network device allows us to see when exploits and those things happen. And I can give you an example of how effective it is. We were called in to do an incident response, and we normally only do incident responses for our customers. But for some of our MSSPs, when they have a customer, they need help, and we're very sympathetic and we want to help. This one happened to be a water plant, so that's near and dear to my heart on the industrial control system and operational technology side. They had an operator who was operating what's called an HMI, just a computer that they use to set points and process and those sorts of things. And he would turn on his HMI, and about 20 minutes later, the mouse would start moving. People are trying to type in different set points on things, some bad things like anhydrogenous ammonia and things. And he would just pull the plug on his HMI and turn it off and try to figure out what was going on. They had forensic investigators, and there are all kinds of people. No one could figure out why and how they were keeping persistence in this network. So we had them. We ship out we have an incident response box, which is kind of our platform all in one. It has a network and a SIM and everything kind of in it. We shipped it out and had them put that on the network. And the first thing we see is part of what our network data does is we have huge volumes of threat intelligence that we update every hour, 500 million some different indicators that we keep in our threat intelligence base. And we saw a device on the network that was reaching out to something making a SYN connection out to something on our threat intelligence database. That's a high level indicator to us that that device is compromised. So we asked them what that device was. They had no idea what it was. So they allowed us to do some reconnaissance. Come to find out, it's a Hikvision camera server that was on their network that they forgot about. And this is what I talk about being perfect. They had it on the network. They totally forgot about it. If anybody knows anything about Hikvision, they're horrible. They're extremely vulnerable. They're not patchable. And so these adversaries have been in there either for a while or as part of another data breach was using what's called credential stuffing. So they had credentials to their network. They were just using Screen Connect from that camera box to connect into the HMI and try to set things around. Kind of a low, not really a very sophisticated attack, but flies under the radar of things that you don't have agents on. So that's why that's important. So again, I want to say easy to do. Simple, but not easy to do, right? These things here. This is the part that allows us to scale, allows us to do what we do. Sorry, my dogs are here. I work from home. Part of what we put on top of our kind of secret sauce is the SOAR automation that we put in to our back end, right? So we have automation that looks over all this data as it comes in. It makes decisions about what it should block from the network side, makes decisions on what it's going to send to the SOC, the severity of those sorts of things, and allows us to look over massive amounts of data and make decisions about that and send the important bits to our SOC to allow them to investigate, right? So that automation is key, a very key component to being able to manage systems that bring in this much data. And obviously we back that with the SOC. So not only do we provide the platform and the technology, we provide the expertise that goes along with that. Now our SOC is US based. It's virtual, runs out of Amazon AWS East West. All of our analysts, they work all over the country. They're all background checked. A majority of them have, including myself, have a clearance. Most of us are TSSCI. I have a few TS. I have 2 guys that aren't cleared, but we don't have any. Most of these guys are ex-military. I'm not ex-military. I just worked with intelligence. So, but very trustworthy people, people who are threat hunters, right? We're always looking for new and novel ways to do things in our platform and how adversaries can get past our platform. But they're the ones responsible for monitoring what's going on and responding to that. So one of the things I will say is that when someone has our platform, if something does happen, our SOC will work with you up to containment, right? So we will help you contain the threat, those sorts of things. What we won't do is we don't make changes to your infrastructure, right? So we don't disable accounts. We won't apply patches. We're security guys, right? So we're not IT guys. Some of those things that security products do and security people can do can cause real life production issues. So we rely on our IT partners to do the actual IT work that's part of that. And I always kind of try to explain to people the difference between, if you put a brand new Active Directory environment, say, hey, here, install Windows Server and configure Active Directory, I wouldn't know how to do it. It's beyond my scope. But if you put me in front of an Active Directory environment, I'll steal every credential out of it, and I'll rape and pillage and do all the bad things that a pen tester can do once they're inside an Active Directory environment. That's my skill set, right? So, and that's not most IT guys' skill set. So we want to make sure we're using the best skills for everything. So Scott also mentioned about dwell time. This is of all the slides I have, I always tell people this is probably the most important slide. It really has nothing to do with what's on the screen. It's just a reminder of what needs to be said. So we talked about Huntress saying that there's 277 days, and those numbers, they're always about the same, by the way. So IBM did a study; it's like 207 days, but realized that in dwell time, let me back up for a second, is the time between an initial compromise, which is going to happen in every environment, my environment, your environment, it's going to happen. You're going to have an initial compromise at some point. The problem you have is when that you detect that compromise and it's 200 days, that's dwell time. So the mean time from intrusion to detection of that intrusion is dwell time. If you have an adversary in your environment for 100 days or 150 days or 200 days, when that is detected, you're having a bad day, because I'm telling you right now, you did not detect that with your tools because they've been in there that long. You detected because you got a call from the FBI, you got a ransom note on your screen, or worse yet, you got a call from your customers because their data is sitting on the dark web somewhere and someone told them about it. All those things, again, makes it a bad day for, and probably, again, an RGE for some people in that organization. The problem comes to the cost when you have large dwell time breaches that happen. So what has to happen? You're calling forensic investigators, super expensive. You're trying to collect from insurance, good luck. If you have if you're involved in kind of regulatory compliance, you have to call your regulators. So HIPAA, for SEC, all those sorts of things. You're probably going to buy new infrastructure. You're going to have downtime. All these things add up to, it's why the cost of a data breach, and again, Verizon does great reports on that. It's why the cost to remediate breaches is so expensive. If you can take that dwell time and reduce that down to hours or minutes or days where you're reacting extremely quickly to things that you see in the environment, when you detect an initial compromise, that again is going to happen. What you have is an event. You don't have an incident. You have a machine, or maybe a few machines that have been compromised, maybe misconfigured, whatever the case may be. You can isolate those machines. You can find out and go back and look at all the post-exploitation data to see if there's any hands-on access and all those sorts of things. But for the most part, it usually means taking a machine offline, putting it back to a new known good configuration, patching some things, changing a configuration, and moving on with your day. It's a few $100s or a few hours of your MSP or an IT guy's time. Becomes a non-issue. Data hasn't been exfiltrated, all that stuff that happens post-exfiltration. And that's what we strive to do with our platform, is to reduce that dwell time as much as possible, because that's the metric that matters. All those other metrics they ask for in RFPs and all that kind of stuff, yeah, it's all fluffy and sounds good, but this is the one that matters, especially to me. Again, I'm opinionated in this sort of thing, but if you reduce the dwell time, you reduce the cost of the inevitable, and that's what you really need to do. That's what helps the platform. So this is, again, not my graphic, but this kind of shows visually where we put our automation efforts and where we put our human capital efforts. This is kind of where this yellow line is that I put here. We're always trying to push this yellow line up, and I should probably move it up a little bit here because we get better and better every day. But the things from this yellow line down are things that are available in every organization, and they're also available about adversaries, by the way. So you can collect this data. You can collect it in mass. It changes all the time, but it lends itself very well to automation, right? It's mathematical based. It's things that you can run, Python scripts around. You can put AI around it. You can do machine learning around that kind of stuff. And this is where we spend a lot of time putting our automation in. Our automation will then tell our SOC analysts, like, oh, hey, there's an interesting bit here. Someone, we saw a DC sync. That would be bad because you should never see that. But maybe we saw an odd pass the hash thing. Sometimes systems will flag things as pass the hash that are legitimate, but it's something that we want to look at. That gives our SOC the ability to make a hypothesis about something to hunt for. And then they can start looking for things that will tell them that this is a malicious act, right? So they can look for tools, post-exploitation tools, things that are hard for automation to detect, like Silver. Cobalt Strike it'll be getting easier to detect, but there's tons of post-exploitation tools that are a little bit difficult to detect with automation. But what Scott talked about, living off the land binaries and scripts, right? So things that are already there, used all the time, right? And it's really hard for automation to know the difference that, hey, I'm using PowerShell to call PS exec to do something legitimate on a machine versus what malware will do, which is calling PowerShell, then calling PS exec to run ransomware, right? So you need to have an analyst put those things together to look for those chains of tools. And that's this TTP part up here. So TTP's tactic, techniques, and processes. It's how adversaries do what they do. It's how they do reconnaissance in Active Directory environments. It's how they privilege escalate. It's how they pivot. It's how they do command and control. It's how they exfiltrate data, even no matter what tools they're using, right? So this is where our SOC can spend their time. And we're constantly trying to push this up. I call it standing on the shoulders of giants, right? So we want our automation to be the giant. We want our SOC analysts standing on the shoulders of those giants, always upping their tradecraft, right? Being able to detect even more complicated and technically complex tradecraft of our adversaries. Because believe it or not, our adversaries aren't stupid. Yeah, there's a lot of script kiddies out there and people who are kind of amateurish at what they do. Those are the easy ones. I mean, that's something that your Windows, that your EDRs are going to detect, and it's really not all that difficult. But there are a lot of adversaries out there that are extremely bright. If you don't believe me, go just Google malware reverse engineers and watch what some of these guys do who reverse engineer malware and what goes into some of these programs and what they do. It's absolutely amazing. So we're up against a formidable adversary, but with platforms like this, the way you beat formidable adversaries is you just have to be faster than them, right? So when we talk about things that we do and how we respond to things we find in the system, it's all about speed, right? So our response process is based around what's called OODA, so observe, orient, decide, act, and it's a methodology that fighter pilots use, and I'm not the first one to ever use it for instant response, but to me, it's a technically superior way to deal with adversaries and responding to events you see in the system. Our system is built 100% for speed, for finding things extremely quickly, getting to the root cause of things, and making a decision about what to do about the cause, and then acting on that decision and repeating that loop again. And that's what makes us better than the adversary. Doesn't mean we have to be more technically complex than they are. We just have to be faster. And so that's what we do. I won't jump too deep into the technical details of the platform. I'll kind of just stop with this to kind of show you what we do just real quick so you get just a little bit of flavor of it. Our platform is delivered with an appliance. And before everybody goes, oh, I don't want another appliance and those sorts of things, there's reasons why we do that. We collect this massive amounts of data, right? So we want all that data to sit on premise with our customers. So we have customers who are FedRAMP, we have customers who have other things. We do FIPS installations, all other kind of stuff. I don't want all their data coming back to a cloud somewhere that they can't trust. I'm not saying you couldn't trust our cloud and things like that, but when that information sits locally on that system, I can guarantee that none of my customer data is going to be intermingled, right? So I work with a lot of classified information, dealing with compartmentalized data, right? So all of our customers are compartmentalized like that. These sensors have a lot of storage. They sit in the network to be able to get the network traffic. They can scale outward. So, like I said, we have some customers that are 5 employees. We have some customers that are 30,000 employees, with 30 locations across the globe. Some manufacturing customers. So, the platform can scale horizontally like that very, very well. But they can sit in line, they can send a spanner, a tap to get us the network data we want. We do the API integrations with the cloud systems and all that stuff. And then we put our agents on everything that can get an agent, right? So that gives us telemetry. Same thing with agents that are remote or work from home devices. You put agents on there. All these agents talk to what's called a cloud connection broker. And the only reason we do this is a very small cloud instance. It can sit in your cloud, can sit in our cloud. We can host it anywhere in the world. But its only job is to securely collect the data from the agents and put it on that devices on premise without having to open up any ports in your firewall. We do not want to expand the attack surface when it comes to our customers. So we utilize this cloud connection broker. We use WireGuard for these connections, or we use OpenVPN if we need FIPS. But what our SOC does is our SOC gets our SOAR will run on top of all this data that we collect, and sends us aggregated alert data. So the SOAR runs, send us interesting information. And then if our SOC needs to investigate, we have an agent that runs on here that's our agent that allows us to then query the information that sits on that on-premise device. So it works very, very simply. We monitor the device. It's 100% managed, maintained, monitored solution. You don't have to worry about it. You take the device, you plug it in, away you go. We can make this bigger too, like so we can separate out what we call the analytics node, so the SOAR piece and the data storage SIM piece of that, and then the PCAP, so the network piece of that, we can push out PCAP nodes to all your locations and still see everything in our organization in a single pane of glass. We're very, very flexible. So one thing about being, a newer company and having engineers who kind of run the company is we're very, very flexible with how we instrument places. We usually ask for a network diagram. We try to find the best places to put things. These nodes can be a single node. They can be a cluster of nodes. Some places we have like 7 different nodes in a Proxmox type environment, fully redundant, the whole 9 yards. So we can do a setup that's based on both budget and the needs of the customer. And we're always very cognizant of budget. So there's things we do, so like the agentless stuff I won't go too deep into, but we do things. We have threat intelligence that I talked about, we deal with. Our PCAPs always run an IDS engine based on Suricata. Everything's signatures, threat intelligence, everything is done both a combination of open source, closed source, and what we get from our SOC. They're updated every hour. We run honeypots, internal, externally. We track risk. We do advanced analytics like looking for fast Fourier transforms and beacons. And we save, this is probably one of the most important things, we save metadata around every single pack that goes through for forensics and monitoring. So we can go back. I had a university probably about 3 months ago, maybe 4 months ago. They got hit with a 0-day attack. So one of their servers, it was a printing server, got hit with a 0-day attack that no one knew about at the time. We were one of the first to detect it. And we noticed it because there was an odd piece of software that was installed in the system. It was an RMM tool. But we were able to go back and pull all the network data from that so we can tell the exact moment it was exploited, if they had any hands-on access, if they pivoted in any direction, if they downloaded a second stage, if they extracted any data. We can go to the agents and find out if they created any accounts in the system. All those things that an adversary will do from a post-exploitation standpoint, we're able to get in and find out if that happened. And when it didn't, we were able to just remediate it by restoring it back up and getting a patch from the vendor. But we can prove all that forensically before we get the network data. The agents do some standard things, right? So they give us the logs, they do vulnerability detection. We're not a patch management platform, but from a vulnerability standpoint, our SOC is interested in vulnerabilities, like any currently exploited vulnerabilities in the wild that you may have in your systems, high-risk vulnerabilities, so remote code execution or privilege escalation, denial of service against production infrastructure, those sorts of things we want to make sure are not in the organization, right? We map everything against the MITRE ATT&CK framework. We have a FIM. We can monitor processes, and we do monitor all the software installs, versions, and all that kind of stuff. And that's for things like supply chain attacks, right? You guys heard, I'm sure, about XC. Just recently, that was in Linux. It didn't get out in the wild, but I mean, we use XC. We have customers that use XC. 3CX was a phone system that got supply chain attacked, right? So they had those vulnerable versions. When those things happened, we can find out instantaneously what customers have that piece of software because we track every single software installation. We can then go in those systems. We can find out if they have the vulnerable version. We can tell you what systems they're on and what you need to do to get rid of that vulnerable version and if you've been exploited because of that attack. So very, very important to have that information over time. We can tell you when it was installed and all that kind of stuff. And I can show you a quick demo. We do all kinds of integrations. I won't go into them all, but we try to integrate with just about everything we can that makes sense. If there's, and this is not a complete list, but if there are things that are in your environment that you say, hey, this would, and Scott and his team have asked us to integrate things, and we always will take a look. Can we get good telemetry from this? Is this something we can write an alert with our SOAR? Is this something we can automate? Yes, we can. Let's pull that data in. We're always looking for better ways to get more integrations and things like that. So we have about, I think we have about 10 minutes. Would you like me to jump into a quick demonstration of one of our lab environments? Would that be helpful?
Yeah, that's cool.
Excellent. So what we have, I'm going to show you here. So this is our backend. So this is not an interface that's available publicly. What I mean by that is you can't get to it on the internet. You either have to be VPN or on your network. But this is the kind of the front end to the data that we get. Now this is a Kibana, either it's open source dashboards, but this is Kibana. It's a Kibana dashboarding system. Again, this is an open source software that we've modified and created dashboards for help us work. This is what our SOC sees when we want to log into a system to query data, and it makes it extremely fast to get the things. Now, kind of show you this. So we do offer you read-only access to this. It should be limited to people. There's everything you want to know about the organization is going to be in here. So you want to kind of covet this interface, but this is kind of laid out the way that our SOC works, right? So when we get an alert through our SOAR, they're going to log in. They know we want them to be able to get the information quickly. So we have networking stuff here. So that's all the network stuff we can hunt on. So this is combinations of cloud data, network data, and agent data. We have positioning data that I'll talk about right here. And then we have all our integrations over here. So we can get to anything pretty quickly. When I show you this, this is a lab environment. There's going to be a ton of alerts in here that you would not normally see. We generate a lot of. We purposely entice malicious traffic into this lab that's gapped from everything else. But anything network related comes on this screen. Any network alert. Not all these alerts will come to our SOC. Again, this is our SOC, our SOAR will make sense out of all these alerts. But everything we store in this system is raw, because when you need to do an investigation, you want raw data. You don't want filtered data. Everything that sits in here is raw. We want that raw data because some things become important sometimes when they're not. So you can take an alert like this, which I'm going to filter for this alert right now. Someone used app to update a package. Whoop-de-doo. We have tons of Linux servers all over the place. But we had a customer at one time that we detected a brute force on, and then right after that brute force, we detected a successful login with the same account, right? That means that they got in. And so we're like, what are all the alerts around this machine? And this is an alert that popped up. So it means they installed a piece of software. Well, then we can go back and see what piece of software they installed. They installed a piece of software called IM Packet. Anybody who's ever done pen testing knows IM Packets is a wonderful tool for red teamers, right? It allows me to interact with Active Directory, do things like DC syncs and golden ticket attacks and all those sorts of things. So very bad. We were able to remediate that extremely quickly. But that's why you don't want to filter that kind of stuff. But one thing you just saw me do, so we can see, again, we can see the alerts over time. We do other cool things. You might like this. We don't break TLS or any encrypted communication because we can't. Well, we could, but in a lot of places it's illegal, right? So we deal a lot with people who deal with CMMC or HIPAA, GDPR considerations where you're not allowed to inspect encrypted data because, especially like a GDPR consideration, I could see someone's personal information that I could then personally identify that person, or if you're dealing with CMMC, I could see someone's CUI data, which I'm not allowed to see. So we have to find different ways to look for malicious encrypted data. And this is one way we do it. We generate for every TLS handshake a J3 and a J3S hash. It's a fuzzy hashing technique that we have a database of about 1 million malware families that's updated every hour. And we can compare those if with like a SHD type comparison. And if those fuzzy hashes almost match, that means that what we're seeing, that communication could possibly be malware, and we can investigate that. And so that's a good way to do it. It allows you to do all kinds of neat stuff too. Obviously, source, destination, IP addresses, ports, GeoIP information. And the great thing about these dashboards, flow IDs, like so every piece of network traffic goes through, we get a flow ID so for that specific communication. The nice thing about these screens is when we need to hunt, anytime you click to filter one of these, that whole screen becomes contextual around that filter. So if I just want to see what alert and what source and destination, what countries were part of that specific flow ID, it'll tell me. So this was someone this is just a Microsoft device sending metadata, right? Not a big deal. But we can do that with anything we see very quickly. And that becomes very crucial when you want to hunt on specific information. So I'll show you some of the cool things. Installed software, right? So this is, there's only 5 servers in here, but if I wanted to come in here and every 4 hours, we're pulling the software that installed, we keep that over time. This system keeps 90 days of live data and a year's worth of archive. If you need to archive longer, we can do that as long as we have the storage. Or if you provide us with storage, we'll store it there. We don't charge any extra for that. But we can come in here and I can go, I want to know who has anything to do with SQL. I can just do this nice little search. It shows me, yep, here's who has SQL. If I'm just worried about this batch processor, again, I'm going to filter down. These 2 machines have it. Here's the last time it was updated. And here's the versions of that particular, all the details around that particular piece of software. I can find that, you can do that across any customer at any time, again, very quickly. And that's the difference. Try to do this with other platforms. I won't mention what they are, but other EDR platforms try to hunt with this much data. And I'm only just hitting the surface of the data that's on there. it makes it very, very difficult. So, we kind of pride ourselves in getting that type of information. I can see every DNS query. I can see what network, what's listening on all the network ports or anything that has an agent. We look for things like if you have something listening on an LSAS port that's not lsas.exe, guess what? You got malware and you're probably part of a botnet. We need to investigate that type of stuff. We watch for authentication failures, right? So this has something that actually does authentication failures for us. If we look for things like password spraying and credential stuffing, like I said before. If you see something like this in a normal environment, this would be bad. But we do get a lot of places that have legacy Active Directory environments, or they have old service accounts that are not active anymore, and they cause thousands and thousands of authentication failures. We will ask that our customers try to remediate those so our algorithms work correctly. We have all kinds of stuff too. I don't want to run out of time, but again, vulnerabilities. So we can see vulnerabilities. This is a horribly vulnerable environment on purpose. We never patch it because it's a lab. So you can see like this would be a vulnerability trend. You would hopefully want to see this go down over a period of time. But we can see, just critical vulnerabilities if you want. Again, we have our automation that runs in the background. We can see them for specific boxes. So I'm going to just look at this Kings Landing DC. Here's every vulnerability, mostly because it's not patched, what they're critical, all the guidance around fixing those vulnerabilities. We have all that in our system. So again, we can start to piece together things. The last thing I'll show before we kind of run out is I'll show you what we call the agent interface. So this is kind of what Wazoo provides. We have backends of this that's a little bit different. Wazoo has a problem of not storing the right data over time. So we've manipulated the backend of this to store much more data over time that's pertinent to us. But some of the things that are cool inside here is to see like the agent themselves. So if we have an alert of any kind and we need to see a machine, as long as we have an agent on it, we can come in and see all the information we want to see about that particular machine. It's security events, it's file integrity monitor. So this tracks registry entries, it tracks system binaries and configuration directories. So any change in those things, this is normal registry chatter, but it's all logged. So we can come back and see what's changed in the machine if we're seeing anomalies. We can see how this machine is configured with CIS controls if it happens to be a Windows box. So we can see this. These are all the CIS controls and the benchmarks, what's applicable, what failed, all that kind of stuff. And there's certain things in here that malware likes to change, right? So we can kind of see those and see if any of those things have changed as well. We can see just his vulnerabilities. We can see his inventory. Like I said, we keep this inventory all over time. Ports. It'll make your eyes gloss over
You
with all
all
the
you
information.
you also have NIST CSF in there someplace, I think, right?
Well, that's something that we do. The WASA doesn't do the NIST CSF. We map against those controls. So,
Yeah,
but
because
we
in New York, school districts map against NIST CSF.
yeah,
So
it's a great framework. I've been touting the CSF for a very long time. It's a great framework. This is the other thing that I do like. So this is the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So this is every log gets mapped against this, and this is kind of an automated way to look for TTPs, right? So these are all the tactics, all the techniques against MITRE ATT&CK. This is updated in real time, and we can kind of see things that happen. Now, things in here would cause alerts to come to us. The valid accounts, not so much, but if you see things like brute force attempts, we're going to look at that. Exploitation of remote services. There was one in here, used to be in here, maybe I have to go back a little bit, but things like application shimming. There's tons and tons that can be in here that would cause us to take a look. Now, the thing I will say about systems like this is they can be false positive prone. It's the last thing I'll say.
all
Anybody
right,
who
yeah,
anybody
okay.
who tells you don't have false positives is wrong. But we have ways to filter those out and suppress those false positives. So
We have a question. Is there
yes,
agent support for Mac OS, Windows on ARM, and iOS? I know.
Windows on ARM, yes. Uh, uh, Mac OS X, yes. iOS, there's not one for the iPhone. We have a different tool we use for people who need agents on iPhones. It's an additional tool that we'll use for those if that's needed.
Okay. I guess we're kind of at time. I can't unmute. If people have questions, you want to drop them in the Q&A, or you pass the ball back.
Let's see. I can pass it back to you. Let's go. Make host. All right, Scott, you are now the host.
Okay, excellent. All right, so if anyone has any questions, you can unmute yourself and you can ask directly or type in the chat. This is recorded, so I think it hasn't stopped. I'll stop it. So Lisa will have the recording. We'll have the PDF slide deck. If there's others that you'd like to see that, you can get that from Lisa. If anybody has a question, we'll be happy to ask it. More information, you can reach out to Lisa. I think you're still out there, Lisa.
I
Yeah, and if not, I do thank you. I think you got a little glimmer of why Bob and I and the rest of the team are pretty excited by this solution. As I said, I think we have what, about 2 years where we've been prototyping this, and um, we're believers. And wherever you are, and knowing the people on the call, you basically saw the various pieces that various districts have for EDR or MFA or what have you. That it's on the list, so they can take all that. So with that, I thank you. I realize this was kind of a weird time for district's end of day, but I appreciate you guys. And if there are no questions, I guess we'll wrap it up there. And if you think of some, reach out to myself or Lisa, and we'll try to get the answer. So thanks, Greg, for that. That was awesome. I
Excellent. You're
really
welcome.
enjoyed that. And I guess for everyone, have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye-bye.